Probably back in October, I think it was, the VA held for those of you that don't even have kind of that background of it, the VA held one of their training webinars on 8515. And in that webinar, they decided to just sprinkle in this little blurb in the corner that they were terminating all 35% waivers effective like October 1st or some outrageously early date, and that you're going to have to submit your new request for the waiver along with your 8515 spreadsheet. And oh, by the way, they significantly overhauled the definitions of supported versus non-supported students. So this started this whole spiral across the nation of how are we going to gather this information and where the hell did it come from? It's not in laws or regulations. The VA's early stance was that they didn't change their interpretation. This was just a clarification training. Well, so then what happened is they held another webinar. And for those of you that tried it at that point, because most of us, myself included, did not attend that first webinar thinking, I don't really need to know much more about 8515, I know how it goes. Well, then they had other webinars which were full to capacity immediately. And then they come up with this other training that I think took place in November. I do have the presentation. We could go through the whole thing if we wanted to, but there's a lot of information that I don't care to discuss. This is the slide I want folks to see specifically from the VA training. That this is the last, at least, public webinar they've had on 8515. And they reiterated that so they changed the deadline is what they did up front, and said that the 35% waivers will reset effective July 1st. Now, what happened recently that's really kind of taking the conversation in an interesting direction is, in the meantime of all of this, they added this new information into the school certifying official handbook, and now they've taken that out. And what I want to say, I have not heard from the VA, I don't have more clear communication than you, but I don't want the folks here to assume that them taking it out of the certifying official handbook means it's going away. The way I'm reading this action is that they don't want you reporting this new information for the spring term. They would rather tackle this after the waivers expire July 1st. So I know some folks were quick once that came out of the certifying official handbook. Folks were excited that they won the battle. I think there was some communication from NAVPA that made it seem like that was maybe the case, and maybe they know something that I don't. Maybe this is dead and gone. My interactions with the VA tell me if they're not saying they're changing anything and that this was just a clarification, then I don't really see it going away. They might be buying time on how to effectively tackle this, or maybe they're hoping if they do it over the summer and folks aren't actually in the middle of their fall or spring terms that there won't be as many complaints. I don't see this going away, especially since this was the last public training and conversation that they had. So they've never issued a statement saying they're not doing it. All they did was pull information from the certifying official handbook. So I kind of just wanted to get that out so that folks don't ignore it too much, because I've tried tackling this. I've tried working with some IT folks. I don't know anything about technology, but I had a meeting with some IT folks at the University of Maine system level just to talk about how queries could be built or pulled, like what could happen. We couldn't figure out a way of pulling this data in a user-friendly manner. So I don't want people to keep kicking this down the road when I can easily acknowledge that this is going to be a heavy, heavy ask for folks that are already overworked and underpaid, typically. So I guess I can take a quick breather and ask does anybody have any questions on 8515 that you think I might be able to answer? Either this means that you don't think I'll be able to answer it, or you're all a bunch of liars, because all I get are 8515 emails. I'll move on. So the more, and if questions do come in, I'll be happy to answer anything towards the end. The more exciting, terrifying, interesting component of my work is to follow legislation, both at a state and national level. I think several of you, probably most of you, remember Robert Haley's big presentation at the SEO workshop when the Colmary Act was signed, and kind of broke down what went into that and what it meant. I'm too lazy to make a PowerPoint, so that's not happening. But also, this is really fresh content. So as far as implementation and what it's going to look like practically, it hasn't all been fleshed out. But I kind of just want to talk through what's been happening recently, and really just, I don't want to start the panic, because who knows how bad it's going to be, but just give heads up on some impacts that are coming down the pipeline. So really what I'm talking about is HR 7105. If I was more prepared, I would have the public law. It was recently signed by the president into law on January 5th. Because of some little known turmoil in DC, they were a little slow on assigning a public law number. There is a number now that I just don't have on the top tip of my tongue here. So this is law. It's signed. It's a done deal. And it was an omnibus package. So there are really a lot of different things sitting with the House, sitting with the Senate, all veterans related. And the powers that be decided that there was a chance they could get it through in a lame duck session, and they did. What that did, and kind of complicated our ability to track it, is we would normally be pretty quick on tracking education bills, and some of that information wasn't surprising to me. But the ultimate names, where it ends up falling got a little confusing. And so HR 7105 actually became the Johnny Isaacson and David P. Rowe, MD, Veterans Healthcare and Benefits Improvement Act of 2020. Now, for those of you that have been in the business a little while, you know that name in itself is confusing for us, because in the veterans work, a lot happens with the healthcare side that doesn't impact us, and it's really easy to skip that over. However, there are probably over 25 sections in this bill that are specific to education. And so what I'm going to do is just kind of go through each section and provide just kind of a little blurb, a brief overview on what they are. Some of them I have zero information on. Some of them I know and can tell you right now are going to be significant down the line. But again, I don't know the full implementation. So while I might not have a lot of answers right now, I do appreciate questions, because this will help guide me on the questions I need to be asking at a higher level, and really start focusing that conversation on what's next. And because this was so recently signed into law, I don't think a lot of folks are having these conversations yet. So it's nice to be a little bit ahead of the 8 ball on that. So the first section, and actually, I'm gonna share the link. Now, I'm gonna share a link and tell you, for whatever reason, they removed the text from the congress.gov. So this is where you'll ultimately want to be looking, and this does have the public law number 116.315. But for whatever reason they must be updating something, or maybe they're just adding in the PL number onto that information. That's where you'll want to be. And then I'll share some information after. The first section here, 1001, is expanding the Edith Norse Rogers STEM scholarship, and it's really just adding in some medical programs. It's definitely an example of them seeing a need during COVID and looping that in where they can. I know the STEM scholarship is still kind of gaining traction anyway, so not many folks have had the chance to deal with that. So them adding in something at this point isn't a huge change to the work capacity. 1002 expands Fry scholarship to a few more folks, and it really is expanding the way the VA is looking at deceased veterans and how their death is attributed to a service-connected disability. So that's kind of the expansion there. Again, that's going to be more on the VA side. They dictate eligibility. And here in Maine, it could, we don't really deal with a ton of Fry scholarships in general, but attaching it more to the service-connected disability could lead to an increased usage. So something to keep your eye on, and help prepare those conversations with dependents, because anybody that has had a Fry scholarship student knows that that's a life changer compared to the regular Chapter 35 benefits. Sections 103 and 104, we're seeing the beginning of the death of the Montgomery GI Bill. We've all seen it coming. We all know that it's happening. This is really formalizing it. Don't get too excited. It's not happening anytime soon. They're sunsetting the Montgomery GI Bill starting in 2030. But that's kind of necessary when you've still got the delimiting date, and there's definitely a process of getting to that point. Section 103 on that topic about Montgomery, I'm personally excited for it. So when I enlisted a million years ago, you got a choice to sign up for the GI Bill, but not really. I mean, you're already scared shitless in basic training, and they're just telling you, like, this is your chance to go to school, like, sign some paperwork. Section 103 is now giving the service member 6 months to make that decision. And that's really good, because what we're seeing nationally is a lot of service members are still signing up for Montgomery GI Bill and paying that $1,200, even though they'll never use it. They're entitled to the post 9/11, and they'll never touch the Montgomery GI Bill. But because it's all a blur in those early days, they're just signing up. So that should be an exciting opportunity, and I think that's a crucial first step in the sunset process, because as soon as that becomes reality, then a lot less folks are even going to opt into the Chapter 30 benefit. Section 1005, only specific to public institutions, and even then not really relevant here in Maine, but this is requiring the in-state tuition for GI Bill students, and it's expanding the timeline, so to students that have separated within 3 years. Here in Maine, we already have requirements around in-state tuition, so it's not going to be a significant change. Section 1006, if anybody gets the chance to push this, I would love to know, and hopefully we can draw some attention to it. But 1006 is expanding VA work study to conduct outreach activities in congressional offices. I don't know how those folks are going to become aware that this is a possibility, but this is definitely something I'm excited for, and I'm sure the delegates are excited for too, because they have specific caps on how many people can work in their offices, and a lot of times, like the fellowship program, or I assume VA work study, that's kind of their workaround, where they can get more folks working for them that don't count towards their official number. So I think it's a great opportunity, and hopefully something we'll see here in Maine in somewhat near future. Section 1009. Active duty benefits. So everybody here that's a certifying official knows that you can't collect the housing allowance if you're on active duty. What this does is it will allow you to collect the housing allowance on active duty if your period of active duty is less than 30 days. So this is going to mean that those folks that are on their mandatory 2 weeks, if that counts as their active duty time, they'll essentially be able to double dip. So that's a good opportunity. Obviously, this early in the process, I see a lot of room for error in this and how that marries up with VA systems. But I think for that handful of people that it will impact, it's going to make a big difference. Oh man, we came to the scary one a little early. That's too bad. So section 1010, enrollment verification. This has a couple things going on with it. It's going to require a dual certification process. I think most folks here do that already, and that's where you submit your initial your initial $19.99 for the credit hours or clock hours if anybody's here, and not the tuition and fees. And then after add drop, you update, bill that. This is going to require that. So that process is going to be a necessity. I have questions there. If you've got a student that's late to the ball game and you just need to get it done, are you still legally bound to submit it twice? I don't know yet. However, the big scary here, because it's language that's kind of snuck in and not being talked about, is the bill also requires students to electronically verify their continued enrollment on a monthly basis. So anybody that's dealt with a Chapter 30 student and they have to use waves and verify their attendance, that is what this is going to require. So technology-wise, I don't think it's going to be a huge thing. I mean, waves already exists. As far as things the VA's tackled in recent years, this isn't the most impossible. Impact-wise, this is significant. I mean, this is a population of students that are not accustomed to having this active step. And so I think it's going to take a lot of communication, frankly. And I think most people here already require a request for certification. And think of how many times students don't do that, and now think of this monthly verification. The law does specify that students that don't request certification 2 months in a row can have their benefits discontinued. I have no clue what the communication process at that point is going to look like. If a student misses a month, is there a letter that goes out to the certifying officials? Are they communicating with the students? I hope it's not from the VA to the students, because that rarely works. But if they're sending like a list to the schools, that might be more possible. But this is obviously something that's going to have a big change. And at least folks don't get overpaid. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of benefits to that, and that's exactly why this is being pushed by Congress. Is it's fiscally responsible, and they're trying to catch the dollars early on. So I do understand, kind of. I just am acknowledging that it's going to be a significant change to the work that we've been doing thus far. Section 1011, post 9/11 dependence eligibility. What this does is for the service members transferring benefits. It includes foster children under the age of 26 as a possibility there. Program, these ones are a little technical, but program disapproval authority. And I mean, it ties in with section 1013, which is risk-based surveys. So I will be shifting work from compliance surveys to risk-based surveys. They're still flushing out fully the criteria that goes into that. One of the big ones they're looking at right now is significant increases in enrollment, significant changes to tuition and fees. But what this is doing is I'm sure it'll take time for them to get to the end goal, but the idea is that SAAs will be looking at specific things and catching actual problems, or at least looking at specific things that might be causing questions rather than following the VA checklist for a compliance survey, because some of that information isn't on there. And so when you're looking at significant increases in enrollment, the VA concern is that there's some questionable recruiting or marketing processes in place. And so it's kind of the idea of catching that early on. For me, that is exciting news. That is a lot less work and a lot more, I think, helpful across the state. I don't know what the implementation on that's going to look like. Also, double-bladed sword, everyone. That means, as I'm getting excited to do that, that means regular compliance surveys would now all be conducted by an education compliance survey specialist. So, it's a trade-off. And so that's section 1011, 1012, 1012, 1013, 1014 is risk-based oversight. So section 1015 is more approval criteria. So as interesting as this bill is, it is significant in that the VA hasn't really attempted to tackle any SAA type responsibilities in quite a while, probably since the initial post 9/11. Colmary even had minimal impact to SAAs and significant impact to the schools. But so section 1015, I'm looking at my list of names on here. Hopefully this isn't going to be shocking or life-changing information to anyone. Section 1015 is now going to require that schools participate in a federal student aid program in order to be eligible for VA benefits. So for, I think, everybody on this call, that's not a big deal. But for plenty of schools in Maine, that's going to be a significant deal. And so that'll be interesting to navigate. Another one that we're fortunate here in Maine, but section 1016 does require specific accreditation for law schools. No issue there. Section 1017 says that if you don't let me do a risk-based survey, your programs can be disapproved. Section 1018 is making certain parts of the principles of excellence law. And so what do I got? Prior to enrollment, every student veteran would need to receive a form personalized to the individual, providing estimates of information like total costs, cost of living, estimate of amount, info to help compare aid packages from other schools, not later than 15 days after the institution or governing body determines new tuition rates, fees. And so, yeah, it looks like it's all the financial aid stuff. And I will share this this document. And see, Sean, that's a perfect question that I just don't have the answer to. I don't know, when I read this as it is right now, that tells me that even if you haven't signed POE, then too bad. I mean, this is becoming law. I don't know if that's something they will further clarify as they write it into law or write up corresponding regulations. So that's a big pending one. All right. So I just talked about section 1010, which was significant. 1019 is probably the worst to your roles as the school certifying officials. And what this is liability for overpayments. And I actually did, let's see, oh, I already ruined it. I did pull up the law on this one. And what this says, and there's a whole section to the law, so I guess I can just share my screen and you can take a peek, is any overpayment to a veteran or eligible person with respect to blah, 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 it shall constitute liability of the educational institution, blah, 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 if it's due to the willful or negligent failure of an educational institution to report as required under this chapter. I'm going to leave this up. You can read through it, look for any ifs, ands, or buts. Obviously, the biggest area of concern here is everybody here that's ever had a line 12 violation on a compliance survey, which is reporting outside of 30 days, that will now constitute school liability, and not just for tuition and fees, but for housing allowance also. So if overpayment is even paid to the veteran directly, this will now be the school's responsibility to pay it back. Never have I seen a section of legislation so unanimously and vehemently opposed as this section, from every organization that's looked at it, and it just has not mattered. This bill had too much steam, and too many good things with it that it didn't stop. So this is done. This is law. I say these things are law. At least the information I've been provided, I mean, it is law that's going to happen. I haven't seen implementation dates. So you know how with the Comary Act, some of those were 2-3 years down the road. I haven't seen that information attached to a lot of these sections. But because a lot of this is connected to the money, and that's, you can see that trend, that this is the VA, or this is Congress trying to reel in the VA's mismanagement of funds, frankly. I assume these financial pieces will take hold earlier on because it's federal dollars that you're capturing. Documentation. And it's a big maybe. I have often, so I know currently Mike Bagley and I take a stance where if you showed me an email or transcript printout that you weren't notified of the date until whatever, we'll use that as the 30-day window. I would not trust that to stand for much longer, because the way the VA would look at these things, and it is the way I should look at them, is I don't care about the school certifying official in this position. When I'm evaluating these things, I am evaluating the facility's ability to provide this information. And so even though you had nothing to do with this, this is a fault, this is a failure on that faculty member's part to report that information within 30 days. And that faculty member is paid by the university. So while I can sit here and acknowledge that Mike Bagley and I we're working around this currently, you know, I'm not stupid, and I can see where this is going to come into play down the road. And this is just the trend of the VA, is to capture this when and where they can. And so, yes, getting faculty to do anything is not very easy. But once you start accumulating some of these debts, I have a feeling, you know, it'll be an easy conversation with the provost at that point, where it's like, well, hey, you know, they can keep doing it if they want. I mean, I can write up line 12 violations on compliance all day long. That's easy. I think everybody here is getting them anyway. It doesn't, you know, it's not the end of the world. It's not me spending the money. And I have a feeling that's going to add up really quick, because even, you know, the numbers you often tout to your presidents and staff, that doesn't include the housing allowance. So it's going to get expensive, especially for some of these Portland-based folks. Although I think Sean in Biddeford campus actually has the claim to the highest housing allowance in Maine, but don't quote me on that. But it's obviously going to be a significant impact, and really require probably some proactive attempts to updating the systems. However you're getting notified of these changes. And this is an area I get frustrated with pretty regularly, is most of you on here aren't dedicated school certifying officials. You're splitting your time in Amy and advising, or you're in the registrar's office or financial services office. And what I've noticed a lot when I do my visits is just kind of I don't want to say office politics, but that's the reality, is registrars aren't keen on sharing their information with financial services folks. Financial services don't really like sharing their information with registrar folks. And really what needs to happen across the state is certifying officials need, whether they're housed independently or not, they need to be viewed as an independent entity with access to everything that's necessary for this work. And I've been saying it for years now, and I think this is really going to make it a requirement, because if you don't have access because the registrar didn't notify you that a student dropped class, then I mean, I don't care whose fault it was. It's now your institution's fault, and you're paying, you know, a few $1,000s. I mean, pretty much every case that this happens is going to be, you know, $1,000+ dollars. It's not going, I mean, in the grand scheme of it, it's insignificant, but if it's happening all the time, it's going to catch up. And the session is being recorded. Share it with everyone. You know, this is real money that's going to be sent back to the VA. And so that's going to be interesting, and everybody knows how interesting that process is in the first place. Also, as far as sending money back goes, don't even try to ask me. I have no clue how this is going to work with Voc Rehab and or Tungsten. Like, I don't know if that's something they're tackling. I don't know, but Tungsten seems to come up all the time, and it sounds like sending money back isn't easy. I don't know if, you know, Voc Rehab operates on their own terms anyway, so I don't know if this is their deal or not. But that's something big to look forward to. And I would say, obviously, there's a lot of information in this now law. This is going to be the biggest impact to the school certifying officials themselves. I'm not looking at my right cheat sheet here. Section 1020, substantial misrepresentation. Again, this is just the 2021 version of the VA trying to crack down on advertising, marketing, same stuff, again, with minimal information as to how they're looking at this. For those of you that have done an approval with me recently, I am required to, whether it's a catalog or a program, I am submitting recruiting material. Any marketing material you have, I'm collecting, and I'm not collecting everything. I don't have that kind of time in my day, but I'm collecting stuff to submit. So I know they're at least looking at things. Who knows what specifically they want. But again, that could, you know, anytime things like this make it into law, they get the chance to write the regulations. So who knows? 1021, restoration of entitlement for students enrolled in closed schools. This is what is this? The bill clarifies and expands upon conditions under which a student may have their education benefits restored. It also allows students who attended a school that closed or lost approval between January 1, 15 and August 16, 17 to receive a full restoration of benefits. I don't have the details. I'm guessing that, I mean, with those dates, I'm guessing that's addressing something very specific, a specific school closure that folks weren't receiving benefits for. And again, they're trying to expand language to include schools that lose their approval. And that way, even if they stay open, there's still an avenue for restoration of benefits. And I'd say it's probably a hot topic right now because of COVID. I can think of one school here in Maine that did lose its approval suddenly because they couldn't afford to pay the bills anymore. And that's, for certain places, that's a criteria of disapproval, and that's done and sealed. They're gone. And that's just here in Maine, little old Maine. So I'm assuming this is something they're seeing on a larger scale across the nation, or at least preparing for the longer this pandemic drags on. The 1022 is requiring risk-based surveys I hope this doesn't apply to anybody in here anytime soon, but requiring a risk-based survey for a facility that converts from a for-profit to a not-for-profit facility, which I know I've dealt with a couple of those within the last year, but hopefully I think we've made it through to the other side for most places. 1023 is an exciting one, very technical, but it is going to allow me to use a portion of my budget for SAA outreach. That's not something I can actually pay for right now. 1024, I'm not going to answer any questions, but that section prohibits the recognition of a state approving agency that's located at or co-located at a university or university system. So that's not widely, that's not a big national impact, but it does impact a few state approving agencies. So that's coming. And then after that, there are sections that I won't dive into a ton. There are specific sections on COVID and pandemic relief around the GI Bill. And then obviously there's a lot of healthcare. I think this whole bill, although I guess I have it open, another reason that not many people are tracking it is the bill is hundreds of pages long. I think the final version was close to 400 pages. And this was something that kind of got pushed through last minute. I mean, I say pushed through, but it really was several different bills that had either already passed the House or they had already passed the Senate. And in order to get it signed by the president, they just lumped them all together under a new random name. So that is that. I'm dropping this link, which is APLU. That's the Association of Public and Land Grant Universities. You can, I think even in their forward text, they oppose the school liability section. And then also another nice summary is from Student Veterans of America. So that's a whole lot of information without a lot of information attached to it, because I don't have implementation dates or a lot of the specifics, but you can get a feel for some of the big changes that are going to be coming down the future. And we can definitely choose to focus on a lot of the negatives. There's also a lot of opportunity with some of these. When I think about the student's requirement for monthly certification, what better justification for regular outreach to this population? I mean, that's an easy door that, frankly needs to stay open. And I know student engagement, is a challenge, especially right now. And so this is going to provide that opportunity. And, it is going to, I mean, Lori chose to mention the financial piece, but the flip side is when you have that student that disappears for a month, 2, 3 months, you're going to know a lot earlier on in the process. And so it's going to be, a little bit easier to identify that. Similarly, the school liability section, which is a nightmare, a pain. I'm going to be very interested to see how much money we end up sending back over the course of that life. But this is also the ultimate opportunity for you as certifying officials to get access to the systems that you should have had access to for months, years even, and really have other folks, whether it's in your institution, whether it's at a system level, the community college system level, folks have to pay attention. I mean, for anybody that's ever thought the role of a certifying official is data entry, wait till they're sending back thousands of dollars right now, because this is going to be significant, and it's good. It's going to catch the attention of senior administration across all campuses and across the state. So not a ton going on, but any questions with a lot of this? I mean, I'd love to hear what folks are thinking, what they're seeing. And that's, you're absolutely right, Amy. That is the unfortunate side of this. But again, I don't know how it's going to look. Is this going to be something that the school, when I deal with non-accredited, non-college degree facilities, they have very specific requirements on how they conduct their refund policy for VA benefits. Is this going to be something that, we've got the words in the law and now the regulation's going to come out and say, oh, if you want to stay approved, you can't pass this debt to the student because it's your fault. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. There's no such thing as a dumb question. Well, I mean, legislation's really, that's a tough one to keep up with. I happen to serve on my National Association's legislative committee, and components of this blindsided me. So there really is no winning. The best way, and of course, Thomas is a little bit of a strange location, but something we've tried doing with some success across the state is regional SCO groups. So I know Southern Maine, mostly the Portland area, has a group that gets together, although I don't think they've met anytime too recently. Bangor area has certifying official group, and they just met earlier this week. I participate. I don't think I've missed one of these regional meetings yet as the SAA. Not to say that that might not happen, but that's a good opportunity, mostly for the certifying officials to talk about what's going on in their circle. And I share information and I'm there. I don't think anybody's viewed me as a punitive part of that puzzle. So, that is probably the better way of staying connected. As far as things happening at a national level, again, I would say NAVPA is a great resource to see things at. I'm not even a member of NAVPA, and that's how I found out that this 8515 thing was a train wreck, is just the communication spiraling across the country on that topic. So I'd say it's worth it. They are expensive for a group, and the GI Bill population at Thomas isn't astronomical, so it might be a tough sell. What? You want my email? Oh, Amanda. I was like, everybody knows me. Other questions? Nobody?
Camden, when does that start, the whole 30-day not reporting and the school have to send back money to the VA? When is that slated to start?
No clue. And I don't think, actually, I think one of those items I did share maybe had some approximate dates associated with it. It's not something I have seen yet, is the timelines on it. Again, because that impacts dollars, I assume those will be some of the earlier implementations, especially since from the VA perspective, you're supposed to be doing the job right anyway. Technically, that's not a change to what you're doing. It's just now changing who has the debt. And so unfortunately, that is exactly how they're going to choose to look at that problem, is that, well, the schools haven't been playing ball. And, to an extent, it's fair. A lot of schools I deal with regularly get the line 12 violations. And when it's a every year issue, that does send a message to the VA and Congress that certain facilities aren't taking it serious, whether it's the certifying official or the processes that are in place. It should have been addressed and corrected. And unfortunately, the door was left open for Big Brother to come in and correct it for us. So I would expect that to probably be one of the earlier changes. I think the only deadline that was associated on there is me changing my job, and that's 180 days. So to give perspective on the timelines that they are attaching, when you look at Colmary and some of the long-term deadlines they had there, a lot of that was because they did not have the systems, the infrastructure in place to make those changes. So I don't think we're going to be looking at, 2-year implementation dates for this. I would say most of these will probably be within 1 to 2 years.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about in terms of giving some folks at SMTC a heads up.
Well, it's already written into law, so
Yeah.
you can share this.
Okay.
Because that's what I work off of. And, I do know that there will be clarifying language down the road, but, a good amount of my work is interpreting laws as they are anyway. So the information, at least right now, is there. Whether it can get refined a little bit and changed, who knows, but this is a good solid starting point. And especially certain things like that, you can only ignore it for so long. I mean, maybe the timeline's going to be down the road, but it's coming, because that is, especially that section or the section 1010, they are pretty clearly written. I mean, there's not a lot of room for interpretation there. Yeah, well, it's a great point, Nola. I think, with a lot of, I've had, between the school I've withdrawn due to their financial challenges and some of the other things going on, I've already had 3 schools this year withdraw approval. And that's just the increased workload, the change. A lot of that is documentation surrounding compliance surveys. I think most of you heard this stuff in the town hall I hosted, but I am now required to collect and submit all supporting documentation for compliance surveys. They've expanded what I'm required to collect for approval processes. 8515 is becoming a nightmare, and now you've got some of these other components. And frankly, the juice just isn't worth the squeeze for a lot of smaller facilities. And when your reward is $15 per certification or whatever it is, that doesn't really get you very far, especially since I know most senior, and it's probably too bad that more senior administration isn't in this session so they could hear these things, but I know most of them won't take this very seriously or act on it the way they should. But really what these changes are doing is requiring full-time dedicated certifying officials. Unfortunately, that's a trade-off too. If you only have a dozen GI Bill students, does that warrant a full-time person? And when you're looking at the changes to 8515 and how that's calculated, anybody that's heard me talked about it knows this, but the new definitions of 8515 supported versus non-supported mean, as they stand, that you can have 8515 violations in programs that don't have GI Bill students. That's still work that has to be done. So even if you only have 5 GI Bill students at your facility, you still have to report on every program, and you could have issues there. I don't really know what the problem is if you have issues. I suppose I would have to disapprove the program itself. But the VA is in a way overreaching. I mean, they do that all the time, but they just keep expanding their kind of grasp and really are forcing full-time work when a lot of schools, facilities will struggle to justify that. Even more so than programs asking to be withdrawn is a lot of my smaller facilities, OJTs, apprenticeships, smaller NCDs. They're just choosing not to play ball from the get-go. As soon as I start hitting them with the 10 million things I need, they're like, maybe this isn't for us. Or a lot of times they just don't respond. So I do think active facilities in Maine are going to go way, way down. Yeah, don't certify twice. So that's going to be a big change for the way the work's done currently. obviously a big increase in hours worked. And again, I don't know what the expectation is to late certifications, when it really makes sense to submit the credits and the tuition and fees together. Or, you know, we've all dealt with it with that one wonky student who, you know, their benefits are supposed to expire at some point, and it's nice to just get that certificate, get it all in up front so that you know when it's done. I don't know whether there's just arbitrary legal bounds to do it, you know, just because. So that'll be interesting. Can we get more info on the changes to supported versus non-supported? You can. I have info on everything, Luke. No answers, but info.
Can you imagine being one of the VA cert processors right now?
Let's see, sharing screen. So again, this is from the most recent training that they did, and there's a lot of big changes. They did change.
I thought they walked this back.
Well, no, see, and that's what I'm urging caution. They have removed this information from the certifying official handbook, but the last information I got were that the waivers still expire July 1st of 2021. So my takeaway is that they pulled it from the handbook so that schools don't do it right now, and that they would rather just push it a little bit further down the road. And yeah, frankly, Luke, you're a private institution, so just the reality, and it's classic VA, there's a lot more room for challenges with private institutions, specifically around where the money comes from. And I mean, I don't think they really changed non-supported too much, which doesn't really help anybody when they completely changed everything about supported. So for those of you that caught, they did change it so that students don't have to be paid in full by the 15th day. Now you have till the 30th day, which is still virtually impossible data to grab in that timeline. Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think NAVPA was great. And so they were really great in that whole process. And I assume that there will be more to come from that. The one area that anybody that's talked to me knows I'm waiting for is that I assume there will be at least further clarification that either the payment is made in full by the 30th day or there's a payment plan. I assume that's got to come down the line at some point. Because payment plans, that's just a fact of life. And so I would assume there's going to be an expansion there. But unfortunately, I'm not sure they're going to bend on any of this information.
But I feel like they're not taking into account schools with multiple start dates either. Like I have multiple start dates in a semester. Like everybody's got a different due date. Like
well, they are taking it into account, just not in a good way. If you get the chance to talk to Ashley from NTI, she can tell you how they're treating different start dates. And it's that any student in that program gets counted, regardless of where they're at, they get counted. And so she has some significant concerns about 8515 violations just because of that alone. They are not viewing those as independent start dates. It's point in time. These are the folks in that program, the end.
so like all of my online programs.
Yeah, it's going to be a nightmare.
I'm
Additionally,
sure
I
we'll
mean,
talk a lot.
the other layer that I think the Bangor folks heard me talk about is what, at least what they've said they want, is the VA wants to look for 8515 at any specific program of education. So whereas I have no legal or regulatory requirement to certify to approve concentrations. So a lot of you have your business administration. I don't necessarily need to approve that as accounting, finance, I don't necessarily need to do that. I can just approve the BSBA, but the VA wants these specific tracks or double major combinations, which I do not have a requirement to approve. So I do think this is going to be a heavy lift. And also I feel bad for Sean and Danielle that have been great to work with and let me mirror our approved programs based on your multiple campuses. Well, now technically you have to approve on or report on 8515 for programs that aren't even on those campuses. So at some point, we're probably going to have to walk back all that work we did. So it's just going to be a huge item to tackle.
I just keep hearing that now I need a raise. Huh?
Hey, I'll talk about the challenges to anybody that'll listen. At some point, I do have at least the early starts of a conversation to have like a session with university and college presidents and get in front of that group and talk about some of these things. So anybody that'll listen to me, I'll talk. I have written letters to schools before. Mostly I've done it on the topic of you need to share systems. Registrars need financial aid information if they're doing certifying official work, and vice versa. And so I'm happy to talk to whoever you think will listen. Other questions?
Well, welcome to Rachel Tracy, the new Maine Law School Certified official. Great timing to come on.
Yes, my last time I was a school certifying officer was probably 25 years ago, and it was some guy named Fred that would come once a year to collect our handbook, collect our catalog.
Yep.
That was it. We gave him our catalog when we had a physical catalog, and he was happy, and we went on our way.
I would be happier too. It's probably the one case that I would be happier to go back to paper days, because you could get away with murder if it's in paper, which is crazy to talk about, but nobody reads through a whole catalog if it's all printed in front of them. Whereas now with everything being digital, it's just a control F away, and VA is telling me what policy they like and what they don't like. So in that topic, and I do see Salika's information shared. I will say, while not always what we're looking for and not as responsive as Tim, she has been great to work with. And across the nation, all I hear from my colleagues are nightmare stories about their ELRs and just rejecting everything. At least myself, it's been a seamless transition to Salika. And I know, just like all of you hearing this, I know this is just bonus work for her. She's not getting paid any extra to take on an entire different state that she doesn't even get to visit. So yeah, absolutely feel free to reach out to the main ELR. I will say always, you never know who monitors that email. So I've been caught sending, nice heads up emails and then find out she's on vacation and it's like the supervisor monitoring it. So just keep it in mind. It's a generic email address. I like the NOLA comment there. The reality was I think Tim just used them to probably hold up his desk. So they all vanished immediately. So it worked for me. Of course, now I have to deal with hey, where was this catalog from 4 years ago? I don't know. We gave it to Tim. It's somewhere. And yeah, absolutely. Work study program is an incredible benefit for the VA students, tax-free money that does not come from the school or from FAFSA. And I think it's going to be a big way of mitigating some of this work. I'm assuming it's going to be a lot of the first line conversation. Like when you're saying you need a pay raise or X, Y, or Z, well, there's all this free money, like take on VA work study, or that was definitely Robert Haley's big talking point is, oh, you're overworked as a certifying official. How many work studies do you have and what are they doing? So I definitely suggest looking into that.
Then we get into the space argument.
Well, there's always an argument over something, Sean. I don't know. I can't help you with everything.
But also access to information. I don't see, in fact, I just sent a private message to Lori back and forth about work study. I don't see my college allowing a work study student to have a laptop to take home that has our database on it. And that's like kind of the work that when I was on campus, I would have them help me do, is to look students up, run degree,
Right.
things like that. I don't see my college. I have not had work study since I moved home to work. But I'm not really complaining about working at home either. Much better than where I was.
No, absolutely. And that is definitely a big challenge with work study right now in a time of pandemic. Going forward, there's still big opportunity when we're talking about, the monthly verification of enrollment. Definitely work study students should be dialing phone numbers. There's certain work that should not fall on the certifying officials that could make a huge difference. And so, obviously access to systems is way easier if they're on campus. But there's going to be things that can be done in the meantime. Well, thanks everyone for coming. Everybody has my email address. In the off chance you don't, I can type it in here. And feel free to reach out with any questions. And of course, I'm big in sharing news as soon as I can, rather than the one SEO workshop. Now we've already done a town hall and this. So I'm trying to keep people posted. And as soon as I have more information on whatever's coming out of this law, I'll be sure to share it. And we'll definitely tackle things in the SEO workshop. And I do plan on inviting Voc Rehab to the SEO workshop, and Brad Merrill with an extended component to talk about whatever the Go Army thing is going to be. So there will be, I am trying to get useful information out there. Lori, I'll get in front of anyone, set up the meetings and I'll talk to them. When is the workshop? I have not set. No, traditionally it's been the first Wednesday of June. And so that's probably going to be the time frame I look at. It hasn't been set in stone yet. Unfortunately, it's been tricky, just like last year, it's been tricky getting the VA to play ball when it comes to using Zoom versus whatever healthcare approved system they use. So whether or not there's VA participation is still going to be up in the air. But, Michelle Mandola is pretty flexible, so she may consider jumping into a Zoom just to have a conversation. So I'm going to see what we can pull off, try and make it useful. At the same time, I'm not going to try and set up a 4-hour Zoom workshop where everybody's eyes are melting out of their heads. So I'm going to provide something that is valuable and try and find that balance. And that's all I got. So thanks everybody for attending, and let's do it again tomorrow at 11.